As you know, my name is Kainton, the Tech Pro, and today I'm going to show you step by step how to build a complete REST API using Node.js and PostgreSQL. Now, if you can build an API and also set up the database, then you can also build a UI, possibly using Angular. That means you've done full stack software development, and that is exactly what you need. In today's class, we are going to simply cover how to build the API using Node.js and also create our database in PostgreSQL. So we are going to be setting up PostgreSQL, set up Node.js. I'm going to do that quickly. And also we are going to be using Postman. I'm going to show you how to set it up to do post requests to our API. So if you are joining me for the first time, hit on the subscribe button below so you don't miss any update from me. So let's get started. As usual, I used to create a step-by-step for you in my website with all the source codes. So in case you miss something, you can actually copy and paste. So if you go to my website, basically if you want to find my website, simply go to Google and type Kainton the genius. So this takes you to my website, as you can see, and simply go to Kainton the genius and simply scroll down and you go to I wrote this recently. So you can also always find something I wrote recently, and you can see it right here. Build a REST API with Node.js and PostgreSQL. We're going to be doing get, post, put, and delete easily. It's going to be step by step, and it's going to be very simple. So the first thing we are going to do, I'm going to try to follow the step as much as possible. Let me increase the size of my screen. So the first thing you want to do is to install PostgreSQL, so you can download it from here. So if you go to the downloads for PostgreSQL, you can actually download. So I use Mac, so I can actually download for Mac. So once it downloads, you simply run the installer to install PostgreSQL. Along the line, it's going to ask you to put in the password or the admin password. So once that completes, you should be able to set up PostgreSQL. Since I've already done it, I'm going to just show you how it's going to look like. So if you go to see, this is pgadmin, that is what you are going to have once you install it. So this is quite easy, so I'm not going to be going through installation of PostgreSQL at this time. So once you've succeeded in setting it up, you have in your browser, you are going to have this page. So simply enter the password you specified when you were setting it up, and you are going to come here. So at this point, you have PostgreSQL. However, we can actually create a database, but for now, I'll recommend let's not create a database. Let's use the existing database in PostgreSQL. So if you go to databases, right here, you see databases, you can see Postgres. So this Postgres comes by default once you install PostgreSQL. So if you drop down, now you see a lot of things that is a bit confusing, but simply go to schema and go to public. So basically this is your database. So actually don't worry about all these things you see. Simply go down to tables and right click on tables and click on create table, okay? So once you click on create table, give it a name. So I'm going to call it users. Also, you can also call it users. Leave everything at default and go to the columns. Now you need to define the columns by clicking on the plus sign right here. So I'm going to click on plus sign. The column is going to be ID and the data type is integer. And this is going to be my primary key, so it's not going to be null, and it's also going to be the primary key. I'm going to add another one. So let's say first name, and it's going to be text. And let's also add another one, last name. And it's going to be text as well. And let me just add one more. Let me call it location. And it's going to be text, okay? So I'm going to save everything. At this point, we've created our database in PostgreSQL. Just to play around, let's just insert one data. Let's insert one record into this database. So simply right click and say view edit all rows. So at this point you have okay, so you can actually double click here and enter the data. So I'm going to enter my record at this point, Kainton. Okay, so cancel. So sometimes it behaves this way. Okay. Okay, so I'm entering it wrongly. Okay, so this is fine, and I'm going to enter location as well. So if you've come this far, you've completed setting up PostgreSQL, okay? So I'm going to actually set my browser in this way. So the next thing we want to do is to set up Node.js, okay? So what you're going to do, if I go back to my website, so the step-by-step is here. So you have to download Node.js and install. If you download and install Node.js, you are not going to have any icon on your programs or on your desktop. So it's simply a runtime available in your system. So how do we know that Node.js installed? The next thing we are going to now do is to open up VS Code, Visual Studio Code. If you don't have it, download and install it. So I'm not going to be going through how to download VS Code. I'm sure by now you should be able to have some IDE, maybe IntelliJ, it may be VS Code. For me, I use VS Code, so I'm going to open VS Code right now. So here is my VS Code. So basically, we are going to simply create two Java files. So it's that easy. So I'm going to say new, file, new. Sorry, let me just come here. Maybe I'm going to just keep these two windows side by side. So let me put this one this way and this one this way. Great. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to say file. Normally, I like to say, so these in Chrome. Okay, so I'm going to say file and say, it's actually new folder. Okay, let's just say open. So once you go to open, you have to actually create a new folder. I would like to call this folder Nodes PG tutorial. All right, so this is the name of the folder, or basically this is going to be our workspace. So if you have an existing folder, you can also open that folder via open folder. So let's go back to the steps at this point. All right, so the first thing you want to do is to install PostgreSQL here. So what you're going to do for VS Code is simply go to, this is getting back to Chrome. Okay, go to terminal and say new terminal. So at the new terminal, you can see right here, you have your terminal. Again, let's check if Node.js is installed. I'm going to say Node version. And now you can see it tells me version 14.4.0. So I have Node.js installed in my system. So now I'm going to install PG. So PG helps us, is a library that helps us make a connection from our application to PostgreSQL. So I'm going to say npm install PG dash save. And it's going to actually install PG and also initialize the node modules right here. So I'm going to kind of increase the fonts. If I can do that, perfect. I think it's better now. All right, so the first thing is to create a folder, a file. So one file is going to hold our connection. The second file is going to actually hold our codes. So I'm going to create one file. So I'm going to click on this icon here. I'm going to call this file connection.js. So all the files we are going to be working with is going to be JavaScript file. Now to save time, I'm simply going to copy from my website this piece of code and paste, because so this piece of code actually defines the connection to your PostgreSQL on your local host, on your local system. So I'm going to paste it. So basically what is happening here is saying that we are creating a new client, and that client is going to connect to localhost. The user is Postgres. The port is 5432, the default port if you've not changed anything. The password is root user, and the database is Postgres. So these are things already defined in your PostgreSQL database. So this is fine. I'm going to just save it, Control S to save. Now we have our connection. And the next thing is to create our server and client. Now, this server we are going to be creating is going to use this connection. So let's go. Let's see. So we are going to be doing that using a different file. So I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call this file API.js. All right. So the first thing you want to do is to create a client by using the connection we already have. We create a client using the connection file, and also create express variable. So express, I think we need to also set it up. So I'm going to say npm install express minus dash dash save, because express is needed to actually make REST API calls. So I think I forgot that. I'm going to update that in my website. Okay, so what is happening here is that we are creating a client is going to use this connection to make connection to the server, to the database. And we also have to create a server, which is app. So once you say const app is equal to express, you are creating a server. You're going to specify the port it will be listening to, and then say what is going to display in the console once it starts running. The server is up and it starts running. And the next thing says client.connect, okay? So basically, if you're working with Node.js application, you're always going to create a server at some point. All right, so the next thing we want to do is to write a query to get all the users. But before we write this query that gets all the users, I'm going to tell you about this body-parser. Body-parser is in charge of handling format conversion between JSON and from and to JSON of data coming from the body of the request coming onto your application. So that's why you need body-parser. So I'm going to install it, npm install body-parser. I think that should be the right spelling. It says a complete log. Okay. I think I got the spelling correctly. Let me see. Okay, so it's body-parser like this. Let's see. All right, so you actually say body underscore body dash parser. Okay, that we have. The next thing we want to now do is to do the fun part, to write the get code to actually make a get request to the database to fetch data from our database. And to do that, we are going to use app.get. Now I'm going to take some time to explain it, although I'm going to copy and paste it. And also I'm going to explain it. So let me just copy and paste and then explain it to you as well. So the app you already have here, we created a variable called app, which is set to express, an instance of express, which is used to listing, to create a server that listens for connection coming. Okay. Now, if a connection is coming, we need to figure out the route or the URL where this connection is coming from. In this case, the connection is expected to come from /users. So if you go to port 3300, where the server is listening to, and you go to /users, it is going to come to this piece of code that says app.get /users. And the next thing you want to specify is an arrow function that contains request and response. These are the two items needed for a request coming from the client. So this request response is the parameters to a function that is going to execute once a request comes in. So that's clear right here. So in this function, you are going to use the client to query the PostgreSQL database. Simply write a select statement that's going to return data. Now, client.query, this query function also takes two parameters. The first is a string, which is actually the query that is going to execute against the database. And the second is the arrow function that is going to handle the response from the query. So in this case, the arrow function takes two parameters, an error from error, ERR, or the result. So if it tries to run this query and has some issues, it's going to we are going to have error, okay? And that is why when we say here if not error, then we are going to say res.send. Res is the parameter from the app.get, okay? Now the result.rows is the result coming from the query, okay? And then when you say res.send, it's going to send these results coming from the database query on to the client making this request. Let's just try to see how it goes. So I'm going to save everything and we are going to execute this. We are going to run this code. So I'm going to say, to run it, I'm going to simply say node API.js. So it gives some error. Client has already been connected. You cannot reuse a client. Okay. So we are having a challenge here. We are having client.connect 2 times. So what I'm going to do, let me just take out the second client.connect from API.js. So I'm going to simply save everything. And at this point, I'm going to clear my terminal and I'm going to rerun the same. Just give it a second. Okay, so I'm going to say node API.js, and you can now say, it says server is running at port 3300. I don't know. Okay, so I think I'm blocking this. Okay, so I'm going to go to port 3300 and let's see, HTTP localhost at port 3300 / users, and you can see that it returns an empty array. Okay, to check that everything is working, I'm going to go to PostgreSQL. It seems this is not saved. Let's see. So let me see. For some reason, this seems it's not saved. So let me see. Okay, so for some reason, it didn't add any data. So let's just insert a new record. It seems I'm blocking this. Okay, I'm simply going to swap the displays like this. Okay, I think it's better this way. All right, so I'm simply going to add data to this table. So I'm going to right click, just cancel this. So it's going to be right click and say script is going to be insert script. Okay, so basically I'm going to add some items, kinds on. Actually the first one is ID of 1 and the last one should be location. All right, so we have a script, so I'm going to just run it by clicking here. So it ran successfully. So now if I go back to this place and refresh, you can see that we have some data coming back. You can see that's the data we inserted. Okay, so we have the first part of our API working perfectly. So I would like to swap back, sorry, give me 1 second. I would like to swap back this display like this. So I'm going to go back here. The next thing we are going to write is a query that gets a single user by the ID. It also works in the same way. So again, I'm going to I'm going to copy and paste because it will save us a lot of time. So I'm going to paste. So in this case, take note of how we specify the ID parameter in the URL. So if you look at the URL, they have /user/ :ID. So that means that the ID coming here is you have where ID is equal to, you have request.params.id and it's specified using $, because this is template literal because I use backticks to enclose everything. So we have the ID here. So you use request.params.id and you get your ID. Now I'm not going to say client.connect again. I think this is error, so please remove it. I'm going to update what I have on my website. So this is about fetching one single ID. And if you wouldn't mind, we are also going to test it. So I'm going to stop my server and then rerun it once again. So if we go to localhost and I refresh, this is fine. If I go to look for ID of 2, it doesn't get anything from ID of 2. And I'm going to check for ID of 1, and you can see that it gets by ID of 1. So we've written get by ID. And the next thing we want to write is add a new user. So there's a code for add new user. And also in this case, take note that we are now using app or app.post, because before now, for get by ID and get all, we use app.get. So in this case, we are using app.post. Now it's basically the same thing. However, we are now getting not only we are not getting parameters from the URL, but we are getting parameters from the request body. Okay. So here we are saying constant user. Let me just increase the font. Yeah, so we're having const user is equal to request.body. So in this case, request body contains the user we want to insert. And then we run the same insert query, basically the same insert query, insert into users, values, you specify all this. Take some time to go through it if you don't understand it. And then we run the query again and do client response.send. So response.send sends a response. Now in this case of insert, we are not actually sending we are not actually sending any data, but we are simply telling the user that the insertion was successful. So basically, like always testing my application once I'm doing it. So I'm going to stop it and rerun the server. So it's working. Now we cannot send a post request via the browser. So we need to have Postman. Now what is Postman? So let me just show you. Postman REST client. So you need Postman to actually make requests. So you need to download it and install it. That's all. Another tool you can also use is Advanced REST client. Either of these two. So this is an add-on to Google Chrome. Simply launch it and it's also okay. For me, I'm using Postman. I also have Advanced REST client, ARC, but I prefer Postman. All right, so we have our Postman. I think it's opening up. Let me just drag the window on here. Okay, so you can see now that we have, okay, I already wrote the URL right here. So if I go to /users, you have an item already there. Let me dismiss. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new user. I'm going to copy let me just paste this one. So now I'm going to create a new user with an ID of 2, whose first name is, let's just call it Nikos. Nikos. Mark Mill. And the location is Germany. All right, so we are creating a new user at this point. And we are trying to insert into the database. So I'm going to send this request. Okay, we are doing a GET request. So you're going to change here to POST. Okay, so I'm going to click on send. Cannot read property undefined. Let's see. Undefined. Oh, so I'm having res.body. I think it should be req.body. It's going to be request.body. Sorry. req.body. So I'm going to save everything. I think this should solve the problem once and for all. So let me just clear my screen and I'm going to all right, so let me rerun the application. Okay, so if I go back to Postman, we are posting new this item I'm going to send, and you can say it says insertion was successful. I'm running out of time, but I think I should complete it. So the next thing we are going to do is to do put and then delete. So I'm going to copy this. So basically this works exactly the same way like post, but in this case we are going to get the URL, the ID from the URL. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to use it right here. So in this case we have /user/ID and we also specify the body. So I'm going to also use the delete at once so that we just complete everything at once. So I'm going to copy for the delete and also put it right here. The complete code for this application is quite easy. Find it in my GitHub repository and use it if you want. If you have challenges, please let me know in the comment box below or reach out to me from any of my social network profiles. So now see that we only have two files here, connection.js and api.js. That's all you need to be able to build an API, perfectly working API, connecting to PG or PostgreSQL. And after now, I think we are going to do connecting to MySQL. Meanwhile, let's go ahead to test this API for delete and also update. So I've started it and it's running on port 3300. So in this case now, if I say a get, I can get. You can see we have two items. So assuming we want to change number 2, we can now say users/2, and we go to put. I'm going to change the last name from McMills to, let's say, the Genius. I don't know, I mix up this thing sometimes. And location now should be Hungary. So if I send, you can see that update was successful. And if I do a get to everything, we can see that we have 2 items right here. Permit me to just make one post request, and the ID is going to be 3. A friend of mine is called Mila. I'm going to just use, okay, so stays in Hungary as well. So I'm going to do a post, and we have 3 items at this point. We have 3 items available. Let me now do a get to everything. And at this time, I would like to delete the second one, the item 2. So I'm going to say /user/2 and do delete and send. Deletion was successful. And if I do get to all, I can now have only 2 items left. So we build a complete API to do get, post, put, and delete, and also get by ID. And I hope you find it very easy. Again, I make this update on my website, kindonthegenius.com. So quickly, always, if you miss out something, go to kindonthegenius.com, and you'll always find me right here, and you can open and check for the latest content. So if you open, you can always see the latest content by going down. You can also find free materials, maybe lessons, maybe some books, videos. So this is what I wrote recently about this very one. So I'm going to stop here. The next thing we are going to now do in the next lesson, we are going to build the same thing with MySQL. After that, we now do the UI using Angular 11 to be able to do this in a UI, enter it in a form and then post by clicking a button. So I'm going to stop here. If this has been informative for you, please subscribe to my channel right now. Leave me a comment and tell me this was okay for you or you learned something from here. And also, if you have challenges, do let me know. I'm always there for you, and I remain Kindson the Genius.